Hey there, it is Mr. K. Welcome back to the next AP Lit lecture. Today we are going to continue talking about how to identify and explain the function of point of view in a narrative. Specifically, this lesson is going to help you identify 3 types of third-person point of view in a short piece of fiction and identify the narrator's perspective. So the last lecture was on first-person point of view. This one is on third-person point of view. Today, our goals, there are 3 of them. We want to understand third-person point of view, how to recognize it. We need to understand why third-person point of view is important, and we want to understand the limitations of third-person point of view. So just like first-person, there are strengths, there are benefits to using a particular point of view. There are always going to be some limitations, and those limitations will really help you think through literature in new and interesting ways. And so that's those are our goals for today. Okay. So let's just start with an overview of third-person point of view as a whole. The third-person point of view is the person telling the story is on the outside looking in. The narrator is not a character in the story. All right. So remember, we talked about our last lecture, maybe 2 lectures ago, the frame. A story is a frame, right? And first-person point of view means that the narrator is within the frame, right? In the story, recalling events that either they themselves are taking part in, or that they are outside the events, but they're there in the story, seeing it happen, right? Third person means that they are outside of the frame, looking in, and we're going to explore that a bit. There are 3 types of third person point of view. There's the objective, so third person objective. That means the narrator does not convey the thoughts and feelings of any character, and they relate the events in a neutral way. Then there is third person limited, and that means that the narrator knows the thoughts of a single character. Right? Then there is third person omniscient. And that means that the narrator is aware of every character's thoughts and feelings. They see it all, the all-seeing eye in the story. All right. So those are the 3 that you really do need to know. You really do need to be able to talk in that way. This story is told using a third-person limited point of view, and here's the function of that. Here's why it matters. So those are the 3. All right. We're going to look at an example in fiction. So I want to look at an excerpt from a phenomenal short story that is pretty popular. This is a popular story, at least within English classes. It's called The Lottery. It's by Shirley Jackson. Now, if you've read the story before, that's helpful. That's great, and I would suggest doing so just because it's a great piece. But if you have not read the story and you're watching this video, you can follow along with the excerpt, and you can still understand today's concepts with just the excerpt. So that's okay. All right. So as I go through, I want you to be asking yourself what point of view the lottery is written in. And so which of these is it? We know it's third person. This lecture is about third person, but is it objective, limited, or omniscient? How do you know? Right. So let me read the piece. All right. This is an excerpt from The Lottery by Shirley Jackson, and it says this. Soon the men began to gather, surveying their own children, speaking of planting and rain, tractors and taxes. They stood together away from the pile of stones in the corner, and their jokes were quiet, and they smiled rather than laughed. The women, wearing faded house dresses and sweaters, came shortly after their menfolk. They greeted one another and exchanged bits of gossip as they went to join their husbands. Soon the women standing by their husbands began to call to their children, and the children came reluctantly, having to be called 4 or 5 times. Bobby Martin ducked under his mother's grasping hand and ran laughing back to the pile of stones. His father spoke up sharply, and Bobby came quickly and took his place between his father and his oldest brother. Okay. I would actually ask you to pause for a moment. Look at this piece, examine it, and try and figure out what point of view this is written in. Is it third person? Again, let me go back. Third person objective, third person limited, or third person omniscient? And see what you think and why. Okay, go ahead and pause. And if you paused or not, let's keep moving. So what is the point of view of the lottery? Well, I, we, and me are not used, right? So we know it's a third person. The narrator is outside of the story. The narrator does not know the thoughts and feelings of the characters. Okay. So if we go back into the text for a moment, right? This narrator is not saying, I saw the men gather. We called our children and they were reluctant to come, etc. That would be first person, right? We know this is third person. The narrator is outside the frame looking in, right? But they don't know the inner, at least based on this excerpt, they don't know the thoughts or the feelings of the characters. And you might say, well, hold on, Mr. K, they said that the children came reluctantly, right? Isn't that a feeling? Feeling reluctant is certainly an emotional kind of characteristic, but it just says that, excuse me, the children came reluctantly. So like the narrator is watching their reluctance. They see it. They are not aware of any sort of hesitation in their hearts. They don't know the thoughts going through their minds, right? And so we can come to this conclusion that the lottery is written in a third person objective point of view. The narrator is detached and distant from the action. It shows a process unfolding without thought or feeling. It's not making any comment on this reluctance in the children or this possible fear as to why this strange behavior is happening. And what it attempts to do is it creates suspense and intrigue. Right? It creates suspense and intrigue. So real quick, let me pause on third person. Let me jump back to first person and look. Remember, we were talking about last lecture, the importance of first person. It develops intimacy. It gives credibility. It expresses an opinion, right? This piece from the lottery is not doing that. It's not, I don't feel close to this narrator, in the lottery. I don't really have anything to say about the narrator's credibility. They're not in the story. They're just recalling it to me as sort of a passive entity, and they're not expressing an opinion, again, about the reluctance or the fear or the odd behavior or anything like that. They're just telling me what's happening, right? Third person, these three options, what this allows is for a narrator of a story like the lottery to stand back, right, and present a whole scene, a whole world, objectively. Ideally it would be objective. They're not making a comment about it. They're just saying, here's what happened. Here's the story. And so, don't get confused because one of the third person points of view is called objective. They're all objective to a point, meaning they are just simply recalling a story that happened. Right? if so I'm going to just quickly keep going. Something went weird with my recording, so I wanted to make sure I covered this point before the lecture ends. Third person point of view, the strengths are that a story is revealed, is told with no feeling, no bias, ideally no feeling, no bias, no commentary. It's objective, right? Whether or not you would consider a limitation being no bias, no feeling, all right, detachment, those can be seen as limitations depending on the story, right? So if we talk about right here, in the lottery, for example, the detachment, the distance, there's no thought, there's no feeling. It creates suspense and intrigue. The suspense and the intrigue is a strength, right? But it really depends then on the detachment, the distance, the lack of thought or feeling. That can be a limitation or a strength depending on the point of the narration, the reader, the interpretation, etc. All right. So that can be said for all three of these too: objective, limited, omniscient. Right. Those are the strengths and the weaknesses. Okay. Sorry about the recording getting messed up there. But today's goals, just to wrap this up, we want to understand third person point of view. How do we recognize it? All right, we want to understand why third person point of view is important. What does it allow us to do? It gives us that objectivity. Understand the limitations of third person point of view. It can be, they can be feelingless, as far as a narrator is concerned. They are unbiased and detached, right? And again, that can be a limitation depending on the story, all right? So, my friends, I hope this recording wraps up well and this all gets together well. I will see you next time. As usual, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. The email address is on the YouTube channel. Thanks for watching, my friends.